A lot of times we observe people, especially famous people, and think that they have these fantastic lives. They were born with a silver spoon in their mouth. And even if they were, the challenges that every human being faces in life are either unknown. Most of them are unknown to everybody else. They are very deep. They're very real. They're very personal. It doesn't matter the stratosphere you come from economically. In all groups, the same percentage of people suffer with depression. The same percentage of people will commit suicide. The same percentage of people have divorces. Um, there is no magic formula there other than the magic formula that we find within ourselves and how we want to view the world.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, I have a special privileges of having Dennis Conforto with us, and I'm going to read some of the things I could not read everything that he's accomplished and he's done in his life. That would take the entire hour and then some, truthfully. But I'm going to bring it back to little things. He cares about animal welfare, children, disaster and humanitarian relief, economic empowerment, education, health, human rights, poverty alleviation, science and technology, and social services. And believe me, he's touched on all of those in everything. Dennis, welcome. I'm so grateful to have you with us today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Dennis, I would love for our audience to really get to know you a little bit. Because sometimes when we look at a person's sheet or we look at their accomplishments, we don't see the human behind all of these things and how they got to where they are. And some people may assume that life has been simple and easy. And of course, you're going to accomplish all those things. So, would you take us through your journey, a little bit about who you are, how you grew up, and then we'll go into every other area that we can think of?
Yeah, sure. Well, just to kind of touch and expand on what you just said, it is a lot of times we observe people, especially famous people, and think that they have these fantastic lives. They were born with a silver spoon in their mouth. And even if they were, the challenges that every human being faces in life are either unknown. Most of them are unknown to everybody else. They are very deep. They're very real. They're very personal. It doesn't matter the stratosphere you come from economically. In all groups, the same percentage of people suffer with depression. The same percentage of people will commit suicide. The same percentage of people have divorces. There's no magic formula there other than the magic formula that we find within ourselves and how we want to view the world. And so I have a saying that I like that is pain is unavoidable and suffering is optional. And pain is unavoidable for every human being. And I know the stories of lots of really famous people that people would be literally shocked about. I try to write about them on LinkedIn because I have the same perspective in a way that you have, that people look at people who are successful and think that, they were born into it or they cheated their way into it or whatever it is. My experience is everybody that I know that is really successful got there because of a tragedy that had happened in their life that they quietly, silently endured and used it as a way to pivot and how they wanted to look at themselves. So I had kind of a similar experience in my life. It's not fun to be an unwanted child, but really, ultimately, when I look back on it, I was unwanted. I was given up by my mother. My mother was sent to Tijuana to have an abortion and decided not to do that. The chances that I'm even here, it honestly is a miracle, because my mom had an abortion before me and she had an abortion after me. But for me, I was spared for whatever uh, reason that would be. Um, uh, and I, and I don't want to get into the kind of the politics of the issue, because here's another thing I believe: not everything that is made political is actually political. In fact, most of it is not political. It is used as a wedge and a way to divide people and keep us apart from each other. And the art of politics today is the art of victimhood creation. And it's decimating on everyone, because at some point, everybody feels like they're a victim. And guess what? Everybody is a victim. They're a victim of life, they're a victim of the human experience. There isn't a single person on the planet who hasn't experienced prejudice at one level or another. It could have been prejudice for being old. It could have been a prejudice because of weight. It could be prejudice because of color. It could be prejudice because of education or income level, whatever it is, religion. We have all experienced it, and we all get to relate to it. And for one group to say you can't relate to me because you're not me, in one way that's true. In another way, it's not true, because none of us get through life without going through the same experiences that other people go through. So it ends up, it's about the degree. How bad is bad and how good is good, and then how do we handle that and work through that. So I can tell you, as a small child, realizing that I wasn't wanted as a child had impact on kind of how I saw myself. I had a grandfather who thought I was mentally retarded and reinforced that you're mentally retarded in my mind over and over again. As a small child, I stuttered because of it. I was afraid to speak. And so when you are told that you may be retarded and you stutter, it validates that you're retarded in your mind, because you're stuttering. You're afraid to say anything. I was afraid of my own voice. Now, today, people can't get me to shut up. I mean, I can literally, you ask me one question, I can literally talk for the next 4 hours without you saying a word to me, and keep this conversation going as I internalize, various feelings that I have. And so it took a while. It actually took a major crisis in my life to get over the view of myself that was handed to me inadvertently by others. They weren't trying to be cruel. They were just honestly saying what they believed. What they believed happened to be wrong about me, but that's okay. We're all wrong about each other all the time. We get to this, I can be mad and angry about what was said to me, but I have also learned the art of forgiveness. And I forgive people not for them. I forgive people for me, because I don't want the burden of having ill feelings towards them because of uh, ill feelings they had towards me. In other words, I don't want to be like them. So to not be like them, I really have to forgive them for me, because at the end of the day, I want to be a kind person. So one of the ways to become a kind person is what happens when unkindness is done to you, your reflection of it. Do you duplicate it? Do you become an unkind person yourself? I inadvertently, when I was 18 years old, became homeless and lived on the streets of Seattle for a year. It was horrific. I um, I didn't really speak to anybody for a year. I stayed hidden in a bush, trapped in my mind that I was retarded, that I was nobody going nowhere, when I wanted to be somebody, desperately wanted to be somebody going somewhere in my life. And going through that transition of believing you're nobody to finally declaring to yourself that you are somebody, there's a, a level of courage to do that, because you got to kind of be a little full of yourself. In other words, you got to do the thing that is really hard for all of us to do. which is to compliment ourselves, to believe in ourselves, to say and make a declaration like I'm amazing. Most people won't say that. It took me a few years ago to learn to declare that I'm amazing. Not that I am amazing, just that I want to be amazing. But in my homelessness, um, I decided that I could no longer be a victim. Being a victim was not going to help me. The only thing that was going to help me was being a victor in my life. And I had to have victory over the one thing that was holding me back in my life. And it is the one thing that holds everybody back in their life: victory over self, victory over yourself. So, kind of in a nutshell, you can kind of get, what my childhood may have been like. It was quite complex. There was a lot of moving parts. There were some things that happened to me that people would have a hard time understanding. Sometimes when I share my story, people are very unforgiving of the people who were unkind to me, which I find ironic because the unkindness was done to me and I forgave it. And I got to explain to them that the person that they disliked that was unkind to me, I also happen to love now. And so then, I've got to go through this kind of process of helping people go through something they didn't experience that I went experience that I experienced. And then I begin to understand that that's not about me, that's about them. I can see how they're tripped over their own thinking, and that the unkindness of others resulted in unkind thoughts on their parts. Now, there are boundaries that you have to set up, right? When people are unkind to you, I learned to set the boundaries up. People can be unkind to me once, but they can't be unkind to me twice. If they're unkind to me once, I create the walls and the boundaries and I set them, and I'm very deliberate about it and very quick about it for them, because I don't want them to trip across a line, because the next time I have to get more forceful. And because I want to be a kind person, I don't want to be more forceful. I just want to be kind, and I want kindness to come back. So that can be the framework for our discussion.
Dennis, you said so many wonderful things in the short period that you've been speaking. I would love to kind of delve into, as you're homeless and you're out in the bushes and your mindset is negative, and you've gone from desiring not to be a victim, but to be a victor. What was that process like for you, so that if someone else is listening and is challenged within themselves, and there's plenty of people that end up going down routes that may take their lives or do things that are very harmful to themselves, how did you get that process moving for someone to see that there is a light, there is something else? Because you have created quite a wonderful life for yourself, and it hasn't been simple or easy, but you've taken the work and done it. So take me back through that process so someone can go, oh, I can do this. I can do this.
Yeah. So to understand the process, you have to understand what it's like to be homeless, truly homeless. So let me explain it to you and your audience in a way that they might be able to understand. And that, by the way, everybody will be able to identify with, because a portion of these feelings we all have at one point or another in our lives, and we don't have to be homeless to actually experience it. But when you're homeless, you experience it in a very profound, deep, sustained way. So it's like having love in your heart with nobody to love. It's like having arms to hug somebody, but nobody's arms is hugging you back. It's like having a mirror, but not being able to see a reflection of yourself. It's like having a voice, but hearing no one else's voice. It's like having tears, but no shoulder to cry on. It is utterly alone, completely alone. It's so alone that at some point in time, you realize that if you stay in this state of loneliness for a sustained period of time, you become a thing that as a homeless person you observe in other people who are homeless, and that is the crazy homeless person walking down the street talking to themselves and yelling at everybody for no reason. And when you see that, if that happens to you, there's no way you can ever go back home again. You are literally lost. I can't tell you how many families I have met in my life who have somebody in their family, a sibling, a child who is homeless. They have no idea where they're at. They have no idea if they're alive or they're dead. They just know that they are gone. It is worse than the death of a child. It is like the living death of a child, a person whose soul is gone, but the shell is there, and the shell no longer recognizes the relationships that were there to begin with. They no longer really recognize their parents or their siblings or their former friends. And then in their utter despair, they might use drugs. And then if you're left alone enough, you can actually induce mental illness into your life. And that is the utter tragedy. So all of us have felt unloved. All of us wanted to have somebody's shoulder to cry on, and we didn't have a shoulder to cry on. All of us wanted to have our voice heard and have sat by ourselves with just listening to an echo chamber inside the walls of our own mind. Everybody has experienced that. So for me, it really was a byproduct of circumstances, and it's such an oddity of what happened to me. I was homeless, but I had money. I had money in a envelope that was given to me by my grandfather from all of my earnings. What I didn't know what to do with the money was I didn't know how to rent an apartment. I didn't know how to buy a car. I didn't have a license. I didn't know anything. I had no ID on me. If I had passed away in those bushes, nobody would have known that it was me, and I would have been buried as John Doe. Which, when you're transitioning from when you realize you're nobody going nowhere and you want to be somebody going somewhere, and you realize that if you died, that nobody actually would know your name and you would be buried as John Doe, it's a horrific, lonely um, feeling of just wanting to be recognized for the length of time that you have in life, which is fleeting at best. At best, I'm 71 years old, and I honestly I cannot believe how fast my life has moved. Now, I consider myself a very young 71-year-old, young in thought, young in actions, young in activity. I'm up on the latest, greatest technology. I'm up on the latest, greatest music. I'm up with everything my grandkids are into, and I'm into the same thing. And I am able to span my relationships with people my age down to people who are much younger than me. And they're always shocked at what I know about their music or their culture or their lives or their thinking or even their political views. That they're just surprised that I understand and get what's going on in today's society. But what happened to me is uh, I really became homeless at the end of my homelessness. And now I know that sounds surprising to say because I ran out of money.
Mm.
I had enough money to hide in the bush, but when I ran out of money, I had no money for food. So the last 2 weeks of my homelessness, I hadn't eaten. So I was beginning to starve to death. And starvation, literally starving, forced me to crawl out from under the bush to leave the only possessions I had behind me. Now, I had nothing, but what I had was mine. It was all I had. Some of them were important to me. I had a scout sash with all my merit badges. It was kind of a record of my accomplishments. I had a genealogy book that was kind of a history of my family that went back to the 1300s. So I knew who I was related to, and I knew some of the story. I had my scriptures with me that were given to me as a gift by my grandmother, and with um, thousands of pages that were marked with little um, notes. And so while I was alone, I spent a lot of time thinking and processing. But running out of money and really running out of food um, is what saved me. Now, let me tell you what I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for the fact that there was no government program at that time for a homeless person. I am like utterly grateful because I would have stayed that way the rest of my life. I would have. Starving to death forced me out to starve for something else more in my life. And I decided to walk back home to ask my grandparents if I could please come back and live with them again. And on my way to walking home, I saw a help wanted sign at a restaurant. And I went to the restaurant. I talked to the manager. He asked me how old I was. I said I was 19. He said, "Perfect. Can you work evenings?" Like, I have no life. So yeah, sure, I can work. Yeah, I can work 24 hours a day if you want me to work. The pay wasn't that much, but it was more than it was more than nothing. And it was a restaurant, so I was always going to have plenty of food to eat. And because I could work there at night, I had shelter during the evening. And when I got off at 2, I would sleep from 2 till about 6 in the morning, and then I would get up and hide in the woods behind the restaurant. So they did not know that I was actually sleeping there, and that really saved my life. And then from that, it was like, okay, I'm earning money. Now I'm around other young people who are going to work and going to college, and I was watching all of their plans in life, and then decided, like, okay, they got a plan. I want a really big plan. I'm so tired of not believing in me. I'm going to do something that I know is absolutely positively impossible for me to do. And then I'm going to go be foolish enough to go and do the impossible, um, which is what I which is what I like. I like I love somebody to tell me what I can't do. It's like my favorite thing. You can't do that. You can't draw. You can't play the piano. You can't do that. All of these things that I now can do that people said I couldn't do. I just sat down long enough to figure out that I could do it and that I was not retarded, that I was as smart as I wanted to be. And I decided I wanted to be really smart. And I decided that I wanted to accomplish something. And one of the things that became important to me was trying to figure out not only how to make enough money for me to live, but figure out how to make money so that I could give it away for people that were in the condition I was in. Now, I don't give money to the homeless. Actually, I do, but in a different way. My money really went towards the continuing education of people that were marginalized and would have a hard time getting into a university. And so I created a foundation for them, a perpetual foundation that funds the full scholarship of about 200 students per year. And that perpetual fund has kept going. I have no access to the money. I wish I did, uh, for a lot of different reasons, but it was my way of paying it forward, because I reasoned, what good is a life if you don't pay it forward? If it's all about you, and what you get out of life, then you don't have a life. So I have a very bad habit. I like it, but for my family and my friends, it can be a bad habit, because I will literally say yes to anything. Somebody comes to me and say, "Can you do this? Can you do that? Will you do this for me? Will you do that?" There's something wired in me that I want to do that, because I spent most of my childhood not having people do that, saying yes to me. I was told what I couldn't do. I was told why people couldn't help me. And so I just didn't want to be that person. So it just, it just inside of me. And when I have to tell somebody no to anything, it's very difficult for me. Like you calling me up and saying, "Will you be on the podcast?" It's like, well, what does your podcast do? You tell me what it does, and then the answer is, yeah. And before I even knew what you did, I knew I was going to say, yeah. I just wanted to have some sort of, maybe noble reason as to why I would say yes. So, um, the a lot of the ways that we break through in life are as a result of a circumstance in our life and a choice that we make. We are where we are at in life because of the choices we made, not what others made. People can write a bad chapter in our lives. We get to take the pen. We get to write the conclusion of the chapter. We can say we're the victim or we can say we're the victor. But the reality is we are where we're at because of choices we make. If we're mad, that's a choice. If we're angry, that's a choice. If we're sad, if we're lonely, if we're isolated, if we feel less of ourselves, those are all choices. And they're horrible choices. Because what good can come from believing you're a victim? What good can come from beating up on yourself or not believing in yourself? And what good are you for other people who are doing the same thing? Now, what's really interesting is to watch a person who will comfort somebody because their suffering is greater than their own, but then turn around and still beat themselves up. That's really when they know better, but they do it anyway. And I see lots of people who beat themselves up all the time who are wonderful around people and it can identify with them because they know what it's like to be beat up and they don't want them to do that. And they give them the greatest advice in the world that they themselves then will not take. And that is the tragedy when you could have done better for you and thereby everybody else and then made the choice not to do it. So it turns out that we think that life is all of these big choices and life is and our personality are made up of not the big things but the small little teeny tiny insignificant choices we make every day and the words we use when we describe ourselves. That
Gosh, I hope people caught that, what you just said. That's so huge. And I will admit, Dennis, I teach a lot of the things you're saying, and sometimes I'll catch myself doing exactly what I'm teaching. It's like, whoa. And that's the self-awareness that it takes going through life to understand that the choices are yours. Life is yours. So thank you for saying that so well. Would you let the audience know what are some of the habits that you've kind of developed to have made you the incredible person that you are? And you did it by choice. What are some of the habits? Saying yes is one of them. What are some things that you can go, gosh, that's how I became the person that I am today? Because there are a ton of people that never figure out their way out of the misery that they're in, whether it's by choice or by circumstances, and never figure out how to get out of it. So, what are
yeah I
habits?
yeah I well the most dangerous thing well, first of all, life is about victory over self, right? That's it. We are constantly engaged in a war with ourselves, and so you have to look at our mind like a computer, and we load software down into the computer, and we come up with new versions of ourselves all the time. I like to say I'm on version 71, and on May 15th next year, I will release version 72 to the world. I know I have some bugs from version 17 where I will say something that a 17-year-old idiot self would say. in a setting where I took a joke a little too far and it kind of wasn't a good joke. And wasn't as funny as I thought it would be. And you get the eye rolling and you think like, oh, okay, well, I shouldn't have said that. So it is people. The one thing I think that people have to fight themselves over is being cynical.
Mm.
Being, we see this all the time. We see people who are cynical in life. They're cynical about everything, which means they're cynical about themselves. You can't be cynical about everything in the world and not have it impact you. So, this is the choice that people have to make about being positive or cynical in life. So that you can be. Here's the interesting thing: success is a series of habits. Failure is a series of habits. They're both habits. If you're failing in life, it's because you've got habits that are failures in nature. And it usually starts about how you either view yourself or you view others. If you view others in a cynical nature and they know it, they're going to see you in a very cynical light. It's an interesting thing. People love people who love them. People like people who like them. People avoid people who dislike them. And it's just a rule of life. And for people to signal out who they like and don't like is just crazy. And all of this is revealed, the human nature is revealed in a very powerful place, which is social media, where I have friends that I watch write a comment that I know in my presence they would never say in 100 billion years. They would never do it.
Mm.
But in the shadows of kind of knowing somebody and not knowing somebody, like they will say, that's like the stupidest comment I've ever heard, or you don't know what you're talking about, or you're this, or you're this, or that, or name calling and shaming and banning and censoring. And all of those are reflected in what I would view as the natural man. There's a natural tendency for us to think unkindly of something. It's really interesting. Watch a child watching a movie for the first time that has a murder scene in it. If you've ever seen it, it is horrific. They literally cannot believe what they're seeing. They look around the room, they go run away, they hide, they don't want anything to do with it. As we age, there's something that happens to all of us. Our innocence is literally ripped from us by transferring from a child to teenager to young adulthood to young married to grand. We're constantly stripped raw of the innocence. Every once in a while in life, you will run into an adult. They're very, very rare. They are very rare. They are exceptional. You know it when you see it. And that is an adult who never lost their innocence. That is an adult who, if you tell them a bad joke, they have no idea what it is you're referring to. They have no frame of reference. Some people can look at that and say, well, they're naive. What I look at is a person who decided that they wanted to be innocent. So if you're looking for a great version in your life of yourself, you have to refight back all the innocence that was taken from you and then put it back inside of you. And it is a lifelong process because you have the knowledge of the lack of innocence, and now you're warring against it because the lack of innocence has a cruelty element to it. And I think that is revealed in the way that the natural person is. So by design, an intelligent person is really constantly waging war with themselves by design. if you're not waging war with yourself, then you are just going through life and you can't develop good habits. So if you want to have a good habit, fight for your innocence and don't be cynical. If you just did those two things, your life would be so much more happier than it would be by remaining cynical and allowing the world to continue to strip away your innocence. We all have this tick in our minds when we know where somebody goes over the line. The question is, when somebody goes over the line, what do we say? What do we do? I watch it all the time. I can turn on the news. I can watch a talking head talk, and all I hear is them going over the line with hateful commentary and hateful opinions and meanness and with people that may see the world completely different than them. We have and this isn't a political commentary. We have the political elite at war with each other, teaching millions of people how to go to war with each other. And it's not a United States thing. This happens in every country around the world where people are seeking for power, and they seek power by controlling the way people view other people. And if you want to take control of your life, then don't let everybody else strip away your innocence, and don't let everybody make you a cynical person when you don't have to be a cynical person. So those would be two habits. I know those are kind of little oddities to talk about, but I will tell you, I'm sure you recognize how true they are by me just saying it.
They're actually incredible and so very thoughtful for people to really pay attention to, because I will hear messages from people that that's just the way it is. That's how life is. It's like, no, you guys, we're the humans. We make the choices. We can change it, starting with each one of us and the way that we show up in our own world, the way that we make comments, the way we treat ourselves and each other. So it's wonderful that you're saying that the cynical part and all of that is what plays into the habits that create the life that everybody's looking for. We're all looking for this wonderful paradise of a life that is joyful, that people around us are kind and respectful. So for you, those are two habits that are very deep. I know that you are a book reader. When did you develop that habit, and what has that done for you?
Yeah. I think I think it really happened when I was homeless.
Mhm.
I had nothing else to do but to read the books that I had around me. Some of them were religious text. So whether you believe in the text or not is almost immaterial. They are full of stories about human experiences and the conclusions that you should come to. So people can look at scriptures and say, yeah, but it's full of violence and stuff. Yeah, right. And guess what? So is the world full of violence. And then you look at how people dealt with it then, the appropriate way and the wrong way, and the results. And, it's sort of a historical reference of what to do and what not to do. So when people look at the scriptures and they say, well, there's plenty of things not to do in there, well, that's true, but that's why they're there. That's why we don't erase history. That's why we don't change history or try to move it around. And this is why we shouldn't be judged by our past, because those were other people's lives. We can only judge ourselves now in today's environment. And the criticism we have of the past 200 years from now, when they look at what we did during this period of time, they will have the same criticism of us, exactly the same criticism of us. And yet there were plenty of good people in all generations of time who were always trying to do the right thing, and plenty of people who were cynical, who decided that the only way you could solve a problem was to wage war or to divide or to separate or to, think about this, regardless of your religion, whether it's Buddhist or Sikh or Hindu or Christianity or Muslim or whatever, Judaism. most of them have a belief in a life after death. Most of them, not all of them, most of them. And what is it that people long for when they think about that? They long to go home. What do they long to go home to? They long to go to a place where peace and tranquility resides. That's what they want. They decide, many people decide, you can't have it here in this life. You got to wait for it in the next life, that there's no such thing as kind of a heaven on earth kind of environment that you can create for yourself. So you just kind of endure it and hope that it's going to change there. And then the thought has to occur to you, why would it be different there than here? Why would it not be the same repeat? We're basically the same person going into that one with all the same flaws. What happens? Well, there's a thing where we make a rational thought that is, well, everybody will be kind there. And maybe because God's there to make sure that we're all kind, and he's not hanging around us, babysitting us here, so we get to do whatever rotten thing we want to do out in the playground. We get to pull on Sally's ponytail and, tie Joey's shoelaces so he'll trip and fall, and all of the nonsense that we do as children that are then repeated when we are adults. So reading then became for me about stories. I wanted to understand life. I wanted to understand stories. So I became, a very deliberate kind of hellacious reader of reading history, but reading fiction, nonfiction, biographies, textbooks, books on science, I just wanted to know everything that I could. There's no subject I have found that I'm not interested in. I have subjects that can be a favorite of mine for a period of time, but if I read too many biographies, I get overloaded on biographies, and I got to switch to science fiction or something else. But I have this gift that when I read, the movie goes off in my mind. I can see it. I can hear the music in the background. As I read, I can smell, I feel the emotion. And reading then became for me the way to have a more human experience of triggering all of my feelings. And the more I read, the more I triggered my feelings, and the more I could feel, the more I wanted to control the feelings that I had. And I wanted to emulate the best people that I was reading, and the best people I was reading about were always kind. They were just always kind. I would just look at them and go like, well, that's a really kind person. Or a person, in my favorite stories, were people who overcame the impossible to do the impossible. Because the impossible is only impossible until it is then made possible. That's the really interesting thing. And the only way that the impossible becomes possible is somebody has a billionth of a watt of a thought that says, I think that thing that's impossible is actually possible. We can see that today with Elon Musk. Really, I mean, that guy, I do not know what that guy thinks is not possible. He just, went out and did something that was impossible. At SpaceX, he literally had one rocket left. This is a decade ago. Literally had one rocket left. That if he didn't get that one rocket up and working, he was bankrupt and ruined. And literally went to everybody on his staff and said, maybe 15 years ago, and said, if we don't get this rocket up, I'm wiped out. You all lose your job, but I lose everything. I lose my name, my reputation. Nobody's going to believe anything I have to say. It's all pie in the sky. And how many people will bet everything they have in their life for a belief that they have in what? Themselves. And a belief that they gave to other people. What people don't realize about Elon, is not only does he believe in himself, but he gets people to believe in themselves and then believe in the team self. Otherwise, they couldn't accomplish this. And not only that, he's running some of the most complex companies in the world simultaneously, which nobody has ever done. So we have our own kind of Thomas Edison that's alive today. We're watching him. He's very positive, but if you watch his cynicism, he is cynical. He has cynicism about nonsense, which is okay. It's okay to call nonsense out that's like dumb. That doesn't make any sense, and I can prove it. And he'll go out and argue it, and everybody walks away going, oh my gosh, I was wrong all of my life, and he was right about this, about a subject that is not his subject matter, it's not his expertise. It's just about an observation he has in life. So if you want to understand who you are, and if you want to understand who your potential is, the more you read, the more you'll know yourself. Because while you're reading, you're thinking and you're contemplating, but more importantly, you're feeling.
There's so much to unpack in everything you just said, but I'm going to ask you a question that is, what is your challenge today with everything that you have learned, have grown through, and have become? And you've become quite an extraordinary human being in everything you've accomplished. What is one of your challenges still?
You mean a weakness?
Kind of
Yeah,
like
is this
something
as
that's still
are you going to be my Catholic priest and I'm coming to the
no,
confessional and I'm
no.
going to go? So, but you know what? I'm going to do that. You're going to be my Catholic priest, and you're just going to have to deal with it because you asked the question. And I don't have a problem talking about my weaknesses. The reason I like talking about my weaknesses is because until I identify them and I'm willing to talk about them, I can't wage war with them. So, um, I I think one of the things that I'm waging war with right now, which is ironic because I'm on a podcast talking about my favorite subject, me, is I think I talk too much about me. When I'm in the conversations with other people, I usually start out, I want to be quiet because I want other people to have airtime. And I inherently know that I am unusual. And I inherently know that people are interested in stories that I have. And I got a gazillion of them that are hilariously funny, profoundly sad, life learning, shocking. I just do. And I have most of my friends who are close to me look at me like a person who's had like 20 lifetimes with all the experiences I have, because I now put my personality out there by saying yes. I have more experiences. By saying no, I have less experiences. So by saying yes, I have experiences that can be wonderful and great. By saying yes, I can have experiences that are terribly disappointing and painful. But I want to have them because I'm not afraid to do that. So I think when I'm in a group setting, I I can easily dominate a conversation, and I really don't want to do that. And um, I suppose I could have a Reader's Digest to all of my stories, but I tend to go the full Monty on them. I just like, it becomes an epic motion picture. And, you got all these people sitting around like, they've got something to say. They got experiences to share. So I think my biggest thing right now is learning to have the Reader Digest version of things that I say. And you can see and just asking me a few questions, how long I can go, and then also how I try to interconnect all the thoughts, and I try to express my thoughts in a way that are different than other people do, using different kinds of analogies that I can relate to as a person who was deemed once retarded. In other words, I lower the the sophistication of what it really is to a more simplistic view, because the sophistication gets in the way of the simplistic view. And at the end of the day, life is really about some very basic, simple things. We always try to want to complicate things, which is what's really interesting when we watch people take the simplest matters in life and complicate the heck out of them. You actually begin to realize they don't know what they're talking about. They really they're highly intelligent, but they come to these conclusions with all of this intellect that when you look at it like that, actually does not make any sense at all. And I actually disagree with it, despite how eloquent and sophisticated the argument was. So I think it was Einstein who said, if you can't explain it to a 6-year old, you probably don't know the topic well enough. So I try to, do my storytelling and my explanations of kind of philosophical views into kind of bite-sized chunks that people can understand, because that's the way I understand. And at the end of the day, my grandfather may have been right. I may have been slightly retarded, and I just have to dumb it down for me so that I can live a quality life.
Dennis, we could talk for hours, and I know we're running up on the time frame. I do have a couple more things for you. However, how can the audience connect with you, reach you? What's the best place for them to do that?
Well, they can follow me on Facebook. There's several Dennis Confortos in the world. There's a very young, very handsome soccer star um, in Italy. So if you see a very young, handsome guy as the photograph, that's not me. That young, handsome guy. There's another guy in Brazil named Dennis Conforto, and he's got a tattoo bald head, and he builds custom motorcycles. It's kind of an interesting thing to see in Brazil, a guy building motorcycles. That would be a very Americana thing, but he likes his tattoos and he likes his. If you see that picture, that's not me. But if you see a face that looks like me, you can follow me there. You can try to be my friend, and I try to rotate the friends out, but Facebook limits it to 5,000, and so I'm constantly going up against the 5,000. Another place to get to me is on LinkedIn or Instagram. You can find me. And LinkedIn, I have a much larger audience. That tends to be less personal, more of my quote me quotes. I have about 3,000 quotes. It's kind of an interesting thing, because I used to have these quotes. I'll just tell you this little weird thing about me, but when I was a little kid, my grandmother had a quote book by Richard L. Evans. It was called, I think that's what it was called, Quote Book by Richard L. Evans. I love this thing. I don't know why I did, but everything was bite sized and I could understand it in my little mind and I related to it. And then after a while, I started developing my own quotes. I just posted a quote that I made up last night. I posted it today on LinkedIn and Facebook. So I got about three or 4,000 of these quote me quotes. But I used to do the quote, and at the bottom I'd put Dennis Conforto. And I have some pretty people who are much more well known than me that go, Dennis, you can't quote yourself. And I go, why can't I quote myself? Well, you don't see Oprah Winfrey quoting herself or other people who have quotes. People quote them, and I go, well, how is anybody going to quote me if they don't know it's my quote? I got to put my name on my quote. And this person says, but you look like a jackass. And I'm like, oh, all right. So I'm looking at it. I keep writing quotes, and I put my name at the bottom. And after a while, I start feeling like, God, I do look like a jackass. Terrible. So I wrote I wrote a thing called Quote Me, and then I got a little logo, Dennis Conforto logo on the thing, and so now they can look at it and they go, he's well, he may be quoting himself or he may be quoting somebody else. But anyway, I feel safer in that environment. So on Facebook, though, you can see more personal stories. I write a lot of personal stories, funny stories about my childhood, observations, things that happened to me. I try to write one a week. I have political postings. So if you're not political, you probably wouldn't want, you could skip those postings. I try to be in the middle and I try to be common sense, but I tend to take sides and I got to be more careful about that. Um, I have a lot of cooking. I love to cook. And people think I am like a chef or extraordinaire. I had a CEO of a company that stayed at Rancho Conforto for a while, and he did a joke on me because I was cooking all day and we're taking pictures of these fabulous meals. And he would go to some famous restaurant and say, "Can you beat this?" And I said, "Of course I can. Can you cook beef Wellington?" I'd never cooked beef Wellington, but that didn't stop me going, "Of course, anybody could cook beef Wellington. Can you cook it for 12? Sure." And then I go and do this thing, cook this thing, and I find out that, and it's amazing and it's just stunning, but it's supposedly impossible to do because when you make beef Wellington, you're supposed to do them in small things. I'm doing it in a roast. Anyway, he got on the Google and he called it a bread and breakfast. So now you can type in Rancho Conforto and it'll pop up as a bed and breakfast. It's not. It's just our home here, and But I like cooking. People will look at it and think like, why does this guy think everybody's interested in what he eats every day? I don't believe they are. I just do it because I like recipes. And there's something about food. I don't care what your politics is, your culture is, your whatever it is. When we all eat, all the knives and the hammers and the guns all sit on the table, and everybody can enjoy each other's culture. So I like doing that. So if you are kind of interested in what I think, Facebook is a good place to go.
I love, love, love that you quote yourself. I think that's incredible. And I
Yeah.
wish more people would quote themselves so that we can see the wonderful human being that they are, not wait for someone else to honor them. Honor yourself. So I love that. And
Yeah,
this,
well, the problem with quoting yourself is, or having a quote, is somebody will always find an exception to the quote, and then somebody will say, "Wait a second, didn't John Lennon say that?" And I go, "I don't know. It's my." And then I go look up what Lennon said, and the words are backwards, and it's basically the same thing. But yeah, he did say it, and probably somebody said it like he did 200 years before him, and it didn't write it down. And this is the thing about being remembered. So you can only be remembered if you create a piece of music that will extend beyond your lifetime. Write something, a poem, a story, essay, or whatever that can extend. Paint something, do a piece of art, carve something. You'll notice I have two heads on either side of me. Those are some of my children. I've got busts of them all over the house. They're made out of alabaster and a white titanium shaft. They came out of the same quarry that David came out of, the upper side where it's young marble, so it has to compress before it gets super white. The Egyptians liked it. And Michelangelo had a brother who had a bunch of children, and it was this great, 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 great grandson from Italy that took a couple of years to make chisel all of these heads out of my children. And let's see, I got to go the right way. Nope. That head right there, that one is me. So someday somebody's going to dig that head up and go, "Well, look at that. Caesar made it to Idaho. Who would have figured?" So,
that's spectacular.
yeah.
Dennis, what is gratitude?
Say that again.
What is gratitude?
Gratitude. Um, it is an appreciation for life. It is an appreciation of everything in your life. Um, People who are really good at gratitude are grateful for things that most people would never be grateful for. And I'll give you an example of the bandwidth of gratitude. I'm grateful for every single rotten experience of my life. I'm grateful for it because whatever rotten thing that was, I did not want to pass it forward, and I killed it. I killed it. And I'm grateful for the experience and grateful for the knowledge that it gave me. I'm grateful for all of the good things that I've been able to um, have happen in my life. I'm grateful for, and I know I'm not really describing gratitude in a way. What I'm describing are the things around gratitude. I'm grateful for gifts. So I'm certainly grateful for the gift of life. That's why I look at gratitude. You can't be grateful unless you have a life. And then as you look around you, you have to literally be in love with everything that you see. Literally be in love with it. You have to be in love with the nature. You have to love the things that people say. You have to have to be really grateful. You have to have other words that are associated with it, like empathy, which is love through the other person's eyes. And so it's not about what gratitude is per se. It's how big gratitude should be and what it should encompass, which is everything. If you want to lead a life, and by the way, um, it is one of the most important qualities to have. You do not see people who get up very often and express deep levels of gratitude to the people that they're in. If you believe that love should abound within the walls of your own home, it will abound there in direct proportion of the gratitude that you have of everybody who is inside the walls of that home. The best guest that you'll ever have in your own home is yourself and your family. And yet, the people that we are the least grateful for are ourselves and our family, which is why these become choices. So if you're in a home and you know that love is not abounding within the walls of that home and not radiating there, and you can tell when you walk into someone's home right away whether love's in that home or not. I certainly can. And so people who are grateful radiate love really about everything. Even when they look at the things that are unkind, there is a certain level of gratitude that allows them to bestow forgiveness. And without without gratitude, you cannot be a kind person. You cannot do it. You have to be grateful for the good, the bad, and the ugly, and force all of it to make you a better person. And ultimately, a really grateful person really has no time to judge anybody else in their life other than themselves. They just don't have time for it. I see so many imperfections in me that spending my time judging other people and what's going on in their mind and why are they so unkind. I know why they're unkind. Something happened in their life. I know why people are in prison. Something happened in their life. Now, just because I understand it doesn't mean I condone it. It doesn't mean that justice can't be served. It just means I understand it. And then If I'm grateful, I'll go out and do something about it. And gratitude is something, finally, that is shared. You cannot be grateful unless you share it. And if you don't share it by your actions, by your thoughts, by your deeds, and by your words, then you're not a grateful person.
Thank you for that incredible answer. Dennis, if I put you in front of 20-year-olds, what advice would you give them?
Yeah. There is a difference between having a dream and living the dream. Everybody, everybody has a dream about what they want their life to be. Everybody, and the dreams are all good and noble and wonderful. Um, but they're but a dream that is not lived is not worth the time to dream about it. And most people have dreams that they think are magically going to appear to them because they have the illusion that people who are living their dreams, it somehow was given to them. Everybody who's living their dream fought tooth and nail to get to the dream. They had to overcome their own fears. They had to overcome their own anxieties. They had to overcome their own unbelief in themselves, despite what they will say about themselves, how much they believe in themselves. Their actions prove whether they really do or not. Look, Steven Spielberg is a great example. He shows up at a studio, he goes to a broom closet, and he sets up an office in a broom closet. That's how that guy started. He just acted as if, and he just wanted to live the dream, and he wanted to be a storyteller and became one of the greatest storytellers in the world in films. And so when you're 20, you've got all of these dreams and you don't know what to do, but what to do is the thing that you don't want to do, usually for most dreamers, and that's work and pay the price. There is a price that comes with every dream. And that price is, one, to believe in the impossible, two, to believe that it's possible for you, three, when people tell you it's impossible, don't believe them, four, when they tell you it's impossible for you to do, double down and try even harder, and five, when they come back to you and tell you or ask you the question, how did you do it? Your answer will be, I didn't believe in you. I believed in me. That's what I would say to somebody who is 20. But by the way, that's what I would say to somebody who is 10, who is 30, who is 40. That's what I would say to myself at 71. It's the same thing. I still have dreams that I want to fulfill, things that I want to do, goals that I have, and I will keep them going as long as I can keep them going. As long as I have breath of life, I will live out whatever new dream that I have in my mind about who I am, who I want to be, what I want to accomplish. Every day, I can see an act of kindness that I can do every day. And people who see it and don't react to it are also people who are not grateful. You cannot be a kind person without seeing something that needs to be done and then walking away from it. That's how I ended up with 40 foster children. That's how I ended up with 6 teenage unwed moms. They all required time, and most people will not dedicate the time to be kind. They will not dedicate the time to be grateful. We can all talk about it. We can all have platitudes about it, but we see kind people in our life. And when we do, we know they are unusual. And guess what? They know they are unusual. They are doing what others won't do and probably didn't do for them, which is why they want to do it for others.
Dennis, thank you so much. I was going to ask you if there are any final thoughts that I may not have asked that you would like to say to the audience. Is there anything that you'd like to say besides the wonderful input you just gave, 20s through every age?
Yeah. Um, yeah. You get one life. This is it. Um, make it glorious. Make it wonderful. Make it end with the line that is in every fairy tale. And they lived happily ever after. That's why they call it a fairy tale, because most people don't believe that line can happen. If you believe that that line can happen in your life, you will have a grand life. So believe in a life where you live happily ever after.
Thank you so much. I truly appreciate you and love everything that you have shared with us, from your authenticity to everything that you have gone through and allowed it to be a lesson for yourself and others that are around you, and the kindness that you show everyone else. And if that can spread in our world, we would see the world that we can all dream of and make it happily ever after. So thank you so much. And to our wonderful listeners, please remember, our attitude always determines our altitude. And that's our choices of how we create our lives. Thank you for being with us, Dennis. Thank you so much.
Thank you.